Hey everyone, welcome back. It's GleeCon and I'm here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to continue with Warcraft, the movie, the novel today. We read chapter 11 last time, and in that chapter, the Alliance, Lothar and Khadgar and a couple guards and Garona they went into the Black Morass and they ran into Duraton. They saw what the orcs were doing. They saw that the humans were being put in cages to be sacrificed, and they made first contact with Duraton, who said, "Meet me at Blackrock Mountain and bring King Lane, and we'll try to make a deal because I don't want any part of this either." So stay a while and listen as we continue with chapter 12. Also, check out the episode later tonight where we do an intermission before we continue Blackrock Depths. So, yeah, here we go, chapter 12. Corona, pull your hood down and ride between us, Caro said in a low voice. His head was bandaged and his face was bruised, but considering he'd been knocked unconscious by an orc chieftain, he was in good shape. Corona heard the sounds of horses and carts behind them. They were no longer alone on the road now that they were on the outskirts of Elwyn. She was not afraid of a handful of farmers, but a scuffle would serve nothing. She obeyed and observed. More and more humans joined them on the road, funneling in like small rivulets that swelled a stream to become a river until at last, at the castle gates, it was not even a river any longer, it was an ocean. Thousands of refugees thronged here with the wide, frightened eyes that Corona recalled from countless cages. She caught sight of one of the short, barrel-chested beings that were known as dwarves. He was attempting to lead a spooked pony pulling a small wagon. A female dwarf and two small children clung to one another inside, glancing about worriedly at the angry human tide swirling about them. One of the harried-looking guards held up a mailed hand forbidding the dwarf passage. "Them first," he shouted. The dwarf's brows drew together. "I work in the Royal Armory, man," he bellowed. "Find a cave to hide in, dwarf," a human safe in the anonymity of the crowd shouted angrily. Others began to jostle the cart, and one of the children cried out for her father. Any patience the dwarf might have had clearly evaporated long ago, and he reached back into the wagon and grasped a hammer so large Corona marveled that he was able to wield it. "I'll cave your skull, you stinking..." "This is unacceptable," Carlos muttered. Louder he called, "Sergeant, muster a line up here. We'll have order or we'll be closing the gates until we do." He turned on the people who had been shoving the cart. "Kaz is making weapons for all our safety. Not one more word out of you." The dwarf nodded his thanks, his face flushed, and was permitted through. Karos and Corona started to follow, but Khadgar caught Corona's arm. "I need to gather my research. Tell the king what happened. I'll be there as soon as I can." Khadgar's mind was a whirl. The same orc who had looked at him with calm intelligence when he had erected a protective dome around himself and Medivh during the initial fight with the orcs had captured him, covered his mouth with a hand the size of a trencher, and then released him unharmed. Not just unharmed, with a request to work with the humans to bring down Gul'dan and the Fel. He inserted the key in the lock of his room's door. He had never been more afraid in his life, and then never more, honored than when this powerful orc chieftain Duraton had given him what was obviously a friendly... "What is this?" Khadgar jumped about a foot in the air and lifted his hands reflexively for an attack spell, but recognized the intruder in time to bite back the incantation. "Guardian!" He felt panicked energy bleed out of him, leaving him weak with relief. He struggled to get his mind working again and answer the obviously furious Medivh's question. The Guardian was gesturing at the clutter of notes, open books, and drawings that papered the room. When Khadgar had run out of flat space, he had taken to hanging them from string, as if he were a washerwoman hanging laundry. Notes were almost literally everywhere. "The gate! We saw it in the morass. I've been putting together all the clues I can about it." "This," Medivh demanded, gazing at a sketch he held. "This drawing. Where did you copy it from?" Khadgar felt like a bird mesmerized by a snake. He stared, knowing he looked foolish, feeling even more so as he tried to collect his thoughts. He didn't understand Medivh's anger. "Guardian?" Medivh snatched a piece of parchment dangling from one of the loops of string. "And this. And this." Another and another. He marched up to Khadgar and shoved one of the pieces in the boy's face. Khadgar's hands and his voice both shook as he replied, the sweat of genuine fear popping out on his brow. What had he possibly done wrong? He swallowed, his mouth as dry as the parchments that were crushed in Medivh's hands. I've been researching ever since I felt the presence of the Fel. I'm the Guardian. Me! Medivh moved closer, forcing Khadgar back one step, then another, bearing down on him. Not you! Not yet. Khadgar tried one last time. I just thought that you might appreciate some help. Khadgar stared into the bloodshot blue-green eyes of the one who was supposed to be the protector of the world, and who he was fairly certain was about to kill him. A heartbeat later, every single note, scribbling, illustration, and map that he had worked so hard on went up in magical fire. They burned swift, hot, and utterly, not even leaving behind ashes. It was as though they had never been. Don't presume you can aid me. You have no idea of the forces I contend with. He took a deep breath and steadied himself. If you want to help protect the king, you leave the Fel to me. He turned to depart. Khadgar sagged against the wall, relieved, for exactly one heartbeat. Then he saw it was on a chair beside the door, the runic book he had borrowed from Karazhan. Don't let him see it, Khadgar willed. Medivh was halfway through storming out the door. Don't let him see it. Don't let him. The Guardian paused mid-stride. He froze, then as Khadgar shrank inwardly, Medivh's head turned slowly and he stared directly at the book. Silence. The Guardian, moving deliberately, picked up the book and looked at it. He did not turn around. The young mage was slightly surprised he wasn't incinerated on the spot. Interesting choice. The Guardian's words were icy. Guardian? I can explain, Khadgar thought wildly. There was a sudden flare in his hand as the sketch he'd forgotten he was holding turned into a sheet of flame and disappeared. By the time he looked up, Medivh was already gone. He would not ask for this meeting if he thought he could defeat Gul'dan alone, Lane stated. He was seated on his throne, flanked by Lothar and several other advisors whom Garona did not know. His queen sat in her own throne beside her husband, smiling kindly down at the orc woman. The Fel must truly terrify him. Garona bridled on the Frostwolf's behalf. Durotan is scared of nothing. Lane glanced over at Lothar and lifted a brow, wordlessly inviting his friend to speak. The location, the suddenness of the meeting. It sounds like a trap, Your Majesty. Garona shot him an angry look. It's not. It could be. She glared at him, her nostrils flaring at the implied insult to both her and Durotan. Lothar returned her gaze without flinching, his blue eyes boring into hers. It is not. What do you think? Lothar asked, appealing to his friend. Lane, it's too good an opportunity to ignore. I think we have no choice. We must stop the orcs from opening the portal. That's a given. But we will need help. And if he's lying, Lane wanted to know. I think it's weird the way that I don't know who was really speaking there. Garona shot him a look. Orcs do not lie. What if he is? There is no honor in it, Garona said, as if that explained everything. And where is the honor in him betraying his own people? Lothar challenged. She turned back to him, to the assessment of those strange eyes. She had learned the human language enough to converse, but she was far from a master of its subtleties. How to convey who to Durotan was. She was silent for a moment, choosing her words with care. Finally she spoke. Durotan is protecting his clan. His enemy is the Fel. Gul'dan is the betrayer. Still Lothar regarded her, gazing into her eyes as if searching for her soul. She was not accustomed to such scrutiny. Most orcs treated her as if she were not even present. They did acknowledge her. If they did, it was only to jeer at or spit on her, or worse. She had not lied to Khadgar and Lothar when she told them her bones were very strong. She lifted her chin and did not look away. Taria's voice came to her. The queen seemed to have something on her mind. This orc Durotan. How do you know him? He freed me, and he is loved by his clan. He puts their needs first, always. He is a strong chieftain. Strong chiefs must earn their clan's trust. Taria regarded her steadily as Lothar had done, but with a compassion that made Garona shift her weight uncomfortably. The queen seemed to reach a decision. Her hand went to her narrow waist and deftly unfastened a small dagger. If we are to expect you to join us, we must earn yours. She handed the dagger to Garona. Defend yourself. With this? Yes. Yikes, that is ominous. Garona stared at it. It suited Taria, not her. It was pretty and delicate, not at all like a solid orcish dagger. The hilt was decorated with jewels, and at Taria's nod, Garona drew the dagger from its finely wrought leather sheath and examined the blade. She revised her initial impression of it. It was well made for such a slender thing. She could kill Taria, Lothar, and maybe even the king before they'd be able to stop her. Taria's gentle smile widened. She knows what I'm thinking, Garona realized. And she knows she is safe. Kindness. And more important, trust. Garona's eyes burned suddenly. She could not speak, merely fastened the exquisite weapon around her own waist. Lane nodded firmly. Find the Guardian. We'll need him. Khadgar had used the ride to calm himself. He was beginning to think the Guardian had gone stark raving mad, but Medivh's attempt to terrorize him into forsaking his research had instead merely made him more determined than ever to pursue it. A reaction that strong meant something, surely. He was waiting outside Stormwind Keep for a meeting to finish up, a meeting he should have been at, but as usual, he was not involved. It was at first glance just as chaotic here as it was at the city's gate, but after a few moments Khadgar saw an order to it all. People moved with purpose and direction, and he heard snatches of military jargon here and there. He paced and fumed, watching as Garona emerged, a stern-faced guard behind her. Her hood was up, again, concealing her beautiful face in its shadows. He looked around for Lothar, but the commander was still inside. Still, Garona might be of very great help. There you are, he rushed over to her. Tell me, what do you know of the warlock's magic? She peered around, tense, even now ready to fight, should she have to. Doing? Getting ready for war, Khadgar answered absently as he tried to get an answer from her. Garona, I need your help. I found... She had started to smile, and now she burst out laughing. He went red right to the tips of his ears. What? What's so funny? Garona tried to compose herself, but her eyes still danced with mirth. How can you not be ready for war? Some of us are ready, Khadgar replied defensively. Oh, yes, the orc agreed, still smiling. You and Lothar, a man and a boy. The horde trembles. He bristled at being referred to as a boy and could not help but snap. 2 men, and many others. He reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out the solitary item that had survived Medivh's inexplicable rage. A single sketch. Here, look at this, he said, handing it to her. Have you heard of someone called Aladai? You drew this? She peered at it critically, and he stifled a smile. Yeah, but you've got it the wrong way. His voice was warm with humor at her innocence. Let me... The words died in his throat. He had sketched it horizontally, but she was holding it vertically. The orcs he had drawn coming out of the great gate now no longer appeared to be running on flat ground. They seemed to be climbing as if out of an enormous hole. And waiting for them, beckoning, was a hooded figure. You drew our arrival in the black morass. How would you know what that looked like? He didn't reply. The heat of his prior embarrassment had faded. He felt cold, terribly cold. All he knew was that he had to take this to Lothar now. Without another word, he ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, shouting the name of Anduin Lothar. When Lothar spied the crate stamped with the symbol of Ironbeard and the Bronzebeard crest, he headed straight for it. Alamon, trying to impose some sort of order on the chaos, inquired, Commander, what are these? From King Magni, Kaz said, peering around a corner of the crate. He says they might come in handier than plow blades. Despite the direness of the situation, and that he had been running on too much adrenaline and too little food and sleep, Lothar found himself smiling as he opened the crate to see several of the mechanical marvels that had done such damage to the tattooed orc's hand. Boomsticks, he said, please. Lothar! Khadgar's voice echoed from outside, and the youth came pelting into the room, skidding to a halt. Panting, he said, I need your help. What happened? Catching his breath, Khadgar said, I found a book. Lothar tried and failed not to roll his eyes. Of course you did. He nodded at Alaman, and she helped him lift and maneuver the crate to one side. No, wait, you don't understand, the boy persisted. He pulled out a rolled-up parchment. The words were coming out of him 1,000 leagues a moment, as if afraid he'd be silenced before he could get them all out. Let me explain. There was an illustration that showed like a gate, like the one we saw being built. I tried to show the Guardian, but he became furious. He burned all my research. He would have burned this too if it hadn't been hidden in my robe. Annoyed but now at least slightly interested, Lothar perched on a nearby crate and took the parchment Khadgar was waving at him. The mage sat next to him. As Khadgar had said, it was a sketch of the Great Gate. This one was intact, and through it rushed a mass of armed orcs. The gate itself was only the length of Lothar's hand, and the orcs were tiny figures as they flowed out. On each side of the gate was carved a hooded figure, head bent. Surrounding the scene were the hills and stagnant water of the black morass. He glanced at Khadgar, raising an eyebrow in confusion. Khadgar reached over. "Now, turn it this way." Now the page was vertical, not horizontal. "Look," he said, trailing a finger over a curve that previously depicted the roll of a hill. Illumination flared beneath his torch, enhancing the sketch. "See?" The hair at the back of Lothar's neck lifted. Turned this way, what had once been a landscape was now clearly a figure, hooded, face hidden, like the stone ones that flanked the opening of the portal. It bent over a gate that was now beneath its feet, towering over the cluster of orcs who raced up out of the gaping earth. Its arm was raised as if beckoning. Lothar fought to keep his voice calm. "What do you think the image means?" "The orcs were summoned from this side of the gate." His eyes burned with certainty and fear. "They were invited in." Lothar glanced around to see if anyone had overheard the unsettling conversation. "The Guardian burned your research," he said slowly, sickly. "Why? Why would the Guardian of Azeroth become so angry he'd destroy the boy's notes? Was he that jealous of the novitiate? Khadgar was doing good research, though Lothar was pained to admit it. None of this was making any sense. The more they learned, the muddier things got. But Dave, old friend, what's going on? Lothar groped for something to say. "The Guardian was probably trying to protect you." Khadgar looked at him searchingly, his brows dark and elegant as raven's wings, furrowed in worry that was not entirely erased by Lothar's words. "Now," Lothar said amiably, "go away." Khadgar nodded and obeyed, accustomed now to Lothar's teasing. The smile faded from Lothar's face as he watched the mage depart. All right, so they're starting to kind of get a sniff here of what we know as longtime Warcraft fans. That Medivh is the one behind all of this. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this journey, and I hope you continue to do so on the very next episode of Lore of Warcraft. This bad boy's in the pipe 5x5.